What motivated a car ramming in Brooklyn? Is anti-Semitism primarily a spiritual issue? And what do the people of Iran seek today? And who are their true allies? Stay tuned for all this and more in this week's edition of Israel Matters. I'm your host, Stephen Briggs. The J-Post reports that last week a man tried to ram his Honda Accord sedan through an entrance of Chabad Lupovich's World in the Crown Heights neighborhood of Brooklyn. After several attempts, police arrived at the scene and arrested him. However, the New York Police Department opened a hate crime investigation into the incident. Moti Seligson, Chabad's director of media, said according to some reports, the suspect had previously tried to enter different Jewish institutions in New Jersey, including Chabad, but was stopped. Let's watch some footage of the incident that took place in Brooklyn.
Yo! Everyone move! Move!
What's he doing? What is he doing? Police! Police!
For those just listening to the podcast, this driver is reversing and backing up and forward and banging into the door to try and break through the entrance, one of the entrances to the centre in Brooklyn. It's a repeated affair. He doesn't just go once, he literally goes back and forward and then is arrested. And it's quite a weird behaviour and it doesn't make a whole amount of sense. The police then escort him off as it comes to the end of the video. So why would someone do this? Why would someone try to intentionally ram into a Jewish centre or attack a Jewish child for speaking Hebrew or wearing a Star of David? Why would people murder Jews for being Jews? 6 million of them in the Holocaust and 1,200 on October 7th. This kind of hatred is so bizarre, so terrible, so extreme, so difficult to comprehend or make sense of, so tragic. All Israel News reports that during the second international conference on combating anti-Semitism in Jerusalem last week, U.S. Ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee and author and filmmaker Dinesh D'Souza identified the root of anti-Semitism as a spiritual matter. The conservative evangelical Christians were the last two speakers at the conference, and both said the real issue with anti-Semitism is not political or even racial. It is a spiritual problem. Huckabee spoke first, where he was asked to address the confluence of Marxism and anti-Semitism on the political left in the United States. And Huckabee immediately pointed to what he sees as the core problem. He said, well, let's get real clear that what we're dealing with is Jew hatred. If we use the word anti-Semitism outside of our own circle, we certainly can use it here. It always leads to a level of ambiguity. But if we just say, look, this is Jew hatred, why do people hate Jews? The real answer is a spiritual one, Huckabee continued. That may be offensive to some people, but when people hate God, they're naturally going to hate people who throughout history, from the time on Mount Moriah right here in this city, have represented the ones that God first spoke to in a very personal and real way and said, you're going to take this message, you're going to create this magnificent land, and through you the world is going to be blessed. Noting the growing alignment of atheist Marxist philosophy along with often spiritualized forms of environmentalism and humanism that tend to exist on the political left, Huckabee continued, but now, if you don't believe there's a God, or you want to believe that you are your own God or that the environment is your God, you'd rather worship the creation rather than the creator. If you reject basic spiritual premises because you had rather live in a secular world that denies the very existence of God, then your first target is naturally going to be Jews. Huckabee also reminded the Christians in the audience that those who hate the Jews often hate Christians as well, for similar reasons. Huckabee explained, now what Christians have to understand is the next target is going to be them. And that's why I often try to remind people, like it or not, we are in this together. And I hope that people will come to understand that the root of Jew hatred is in fact not political, it is not economic, it is spiritual. In a similar manner, author and filmmaker Dinesh D'Souza was asked to differentiate between anti-Semitism on the political left and right, or whether they are in fact the same phenomenon. D'Souza began his response by saying, "I think for me, the phenomenon of anti-Semitism is very tricky because it is conventionally defined as a hatred of the Jews for being Jews. I don't know how much that explains of a phenomenon." D'Souza continued, he then began to give an explanation for anti-Semitism based on the political factors, with many hating Israel and by extension the Jews because they function as representatives of the Western world in a region which is often hostile to that world. However, D'Souza then paused, saying, "I think Ambassador Huckabee touched on something that has not been a big theme in this conference, and that is I'll call it, the transcendental motive of anti-Semitism, which I think actually deserves a little more explanation." He referred to Paradise Lost by English writer John Milton, specifically the scene where Satan first sees Adam and Eve and becomes filled with envy and hatred. This is, in fact, I think, an important motive of anti-Semitism. D'Souza remarked, "It's maybe the most powerful secular motive that you can give," but he noted that envy by itself is not sufficient. D'Souza explained, and yet there's a second thing going on, and that is that Satan is in a campaign against God. Adam and Eve have done nothing to Satan, but Satan's malice against them is a revenge scheme against the Creator himself. D'Souza continued, "Apply this logic now to the Jews." Like Huckabee, D'Souza noted that the Jews have also been God's chosen people. The mechanism by which you can say the moral law is transmitted to the world is through the Jews. And if you believe that there is a world behind the world, and if you believe that there is a cosmic battle between good and evil that rages in the world, then it is not out of the question that what we are seeing in anti-Semitism is truly a kind of scheme by none other than the devil himself to torment the Jews as a form of revenge against God, he explained. And this would also extend to some degree to the Christians for the same reason. I'm glad this discussion about the spiritual roots of anti-Semitism is being held in the public square. I suggest that there is no other explanation for anti-Semitism that fully makes sense if you try to subtract the spiritual element. God says the Jewish people are the apple of his eye in Deuteronomy 32 verse 10 and Zechariah 2 verse 8. And Satan hates what God loves. I also believe it's important for Christians to love what God loves. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you believe is the root of anti-Semitism in the comments below. Please take a moment, tell us what you feel is the foundation of anti-Semitism and why it continues throughout the generations to rear its ugly and destructive head. Well, Iran, of course, has been at the center of international news for the last month, and we are all hoping and praying to see a breakthrough of freedom and relief for the people of Iran. Here today to help us understand the realities of the intense situation is a special guest. Khosro Isfahani is joining us today, and I'm so looking forward to this conversation. He's the Director of Research at the National Union for Democracy in Iran, NUFDI, as you can see behind him on the wall, a Washington-based non-profit focused on human rights, security, and democratic development in Iran. Khosro brings over a decade of direct experience with human rights defense and journalism inside Iran, where he worked from 2009 until 2021, documenting human rights violations, supporting at-risk communities, and engaging with international media, human rights organizations, and, of course, the United Nations. And after leaving Iran, he served as a lead analyst and reporter on Iranian affairs for BBC Monitoring, covering state violence against protesters and security developments. He later taught human rights and modern Iranian history in the United States at Colby College and led open-source research on violations linked to the Islamic Republic while at the Atlantic Council. He brings deep insight into the lived realities of Iranians today, politically, socially, and in their perceptions of global powers. Thank you so much for joining us today, Khosro. I'm so pleased to have you with us.
Thanks for having me, Stephen.
It's a delight. Well, from your direct research, and that's your role as the head of research now and reporting, what is the current situation for ordinary Iranians in terms of daily life, economic pressures? We know the rial is going through the roof. I think it's 1.6 or 1.7 million rials to the dollar at present. Security crackdowns, access to information. What is happening on the ground?
So around over a month ago, Iranians rose up again against the Islamic Republic. This national uprising was fundamentally different from everything we had seen before. You mentioned the work that I have done as a journalist and a human rights defender in the context of Iran, but my work was not limited to that. I have also been involved with organizing rallies and opposition work against the regime through these years. I have been in the trenches with my compatriots for years, and I come from a family of activists who have been fighting against the Islamic Republic since its inception. My dad was a political prisoner. So I grew up with stories of uprising and revolt against this fascist Islamist system that has exported terrorism around the world, has killed thousands of innocent Iranians inside the country, and has claimed lives of thousands of people beyond the borders of Iran. We have been fighting this regime for decades. But back to your question, where we are today, the Islamic Republic is at its weakest point ever. It's received a battering from Israel during the 12-day war, during that glorious military operation. That the surgical strikes that we saw during that operation, the level of precision, it's unparalleled. You cannot find a single example in history of military operations around the world that showed this level of precision. That was unprecedented. During a few hours, Israel dismantled the whole top echelon of Islamic Republic's military power. At the same time, they took out the regime's air defenses, missile bases, and name it. There is a long list. And then Donald Trump stepped in with Midnight Hammer, that strike that almost dismantled the Islamic Republic's active nuclear program. There is still 400 kilograms of highly enriched uranium inside Iran that the regime can turn into a dirty bomb that can go off in any Western capital at any hour, and this regime would not shy away from terrorism. But the nuclear threat has been reduced significantly. Where we are with the Islamic Republic, its IRGC has been designated as a terrorist organization. The economy is in shambles. You mentioned the rial, but the issue is not just the rial. Over the past year, food prices has more than doubled in Iran. People cannot afford shelter, food, or healthcare. Every day they struggle for the basic needs. They cannot even make the ends meet. That's where Iranians are at. And this regime, what is spending its scant resources, financial resources on, while smuggling oil to China, is propping up terrorism across the Middle East. The other day, they were threatening France with suicide bombings. After IRGC was designated as a terror organization, they sent out Basij militia controlled by IRGC outside the French embassy in Tehran with banners saying that there will be a response to this designation. We are going to use suicide bombings, as if the world needed more evidence of what the Islamic Republic is. So we are dealing with a desperate regime grasping at straws, trying to preserve its disgusting life that has destroyed so many lives on Earth. That's where we are.
And of course, it's magnified greatly over the past month or so. I mean, the IRGC being recognized as a terrorist organization in Europe, it's come a bit late, don't you think? This has been operational for quite a while, but at least there is an acknowledgement there now, and you see the responses you've mentioned outside the French embassy, and we'll see that increased across Europe as well. But there is so much that's gone on just in the past few weeks alone. What is obviously the regime's violence against protesters? Give us some I'm sure you have personal stories of those that you know on the ground that have experienced some of this violence. And what is the pattern that is going on night after night in Iran at present?
So whomever you talk with inside Iran, any random person that you pick, they have at least lost one person during this brutal crackdown. During 2 days, January 8 and 9, the regime killed at least 36,000 people, at least 36,000. Human rights organizations right now are looking at potential evidence of mass graves. The other day, one woman, this is a testimony, we haven't been able to directly verify it, but this old woman was saying that a young couple through their window saw that security forces are shooting at protesters. They rush down in their apartment to open the doors and bring in the injured. They get killed. The thing is, they had a 3-month-old child in their apartment. That baby starved to death because no one knew the parents were dead. These are just samples. We have received testimonies about dead bodies being decapitated on the streets. We have seen videos of snipers on buildings consuming drugs before shooting protesters in the head. Children have been killed. I have been doing this work for years. If a month ago you had asked me, I would have told you I have seen the darkest face of humanity. I have verified deaths. You mentioned my time with BBC. I literally verified deaths for the BBC. What that entailed was going through hours and hours of families washing dead bodies, trying to find a snippet of a face and comparing that with an ID card to say that, yes, this is the person who has been killed. But every case that I had worked, these were adults. We are seeing footage of infants being hit by bullets. Have you seen an infant hit by a bullet? The level of pain that Iranians are facing is immense. But at the same time, we are facing a nation, a proud nation that has risen up with resolve. Every cycle of protests that in the past we took to the streets, we have stepped one step forward. Our demands have increased. From early days of demanding slight changes to freedom of press in 90s, to asking the Islamic Republic, let us vote for one of your insiders as president in 2009, to economic grievances of 2016-17, and later 2019. And then the Women Life Freedom Movement, when people had clarity about the broad lines of what they want, wanting dignity, equality, freedom, normal life being reintegrated in the global community. The regime has always said no to all these demands. But this time, millions of Iranians took to the streets with absolute clarity about even who is their leader. Millions of Iranians facing guns and bullets, dying in thousands, chanted the name of Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi as the leader of the opposition, making it clear who they see as the only person that can lead Iran out of this nightmare. And that chant has hurt the Islamic Republic so bad. The level of violence they unleashed was because they faced a unified nation behind a singular leader under a singular banner. That makes every dictator shake. And that people, my people, are unrelenting in their fight for reclaiming Iran. Iranians are on the front line for the humanity. We are fighting the ugliest face of fascism on earth. Earlier in your program, you were speaking about anti-Semitism and Jew hatred. Is there any worse Jew hater than the Islamic Republic, a state that has exported terrorism around the world, has vowed to erase Israel off the face of the earth, has brought us October 7th? That terror attack, that horrendous terror attack was made possible by years of investment by the Islamic Republic, by IRGC Quds Force, in terror organizations like Hezbollah, like Hamas, like Palestinian liberation, this or that. This regime has propped up all those terror groups, and it needs to go. Our brothers in arms, people in Israel, have helped us weaken this regime during the 12-day war. Iranians have proved that we are the boots on the ground for overthrowing the Islamic Republic. We have absolute clarity about what we want, who is our leader, what is our banner, what is our vision for future. And when you talk with Iranians inside the country, each and every one of them expect one thing. Donald Trump weeks ago promised Iranians that aid is on the way. And he has dispatched that glorious flotilla, and it's stationed and it's ready to go. Aid is prepared to be delivered to Iranians. And the US president has a moral responsibility to deliver on his promise. He has a historic duty to this nation, to the United States, to Americans, to end this suffering, this nightmare that we have been fighting for 4 decades. And when you talk with Iranians inside the country, they expect the strikes to arrive before dawn. That's why most Iranians stay up until dawn, because they want to see the glorious moment that bells tell that the Islamic Republic is falling.
I want to point out something you said earlier on within that great explanation of everything that's going on. On January 8th and 9th, 36,000, and it's known that that was how many people minimally died in Iran. And parallel that with the fact that it's been acknowledged that 70,000 people have died in Gaza over 850 days in length. How careful Israel has been in seeking to only take terrorists out of the equation and not take innocent civilians. I mean, purely and simply, the maths on that is incredible in seeing the contrast between how much Israel has valued life within a tiny postage-sized stamp of territory known as Gaza, and 70,000 over, as I said, 850 days, and yet 36,000 civilians in 2 days in Iran were murdered.
More important even than the number is the quote that we have from Golda Meir. We can forgive you for killing our children, but we are not going to forgive you for making us kill yours. That's the driver of the state of Israel. Talk with every IDF soldier who has served in Gaza. They carry pain. No one wanted that. No one wanted that. And where are those lunatics who have been chanting on the streets in the West in support of Hamas, and in support of Hezbollah, and in support of the resistance, and against the so-called genocide? Where are they? 36,000.
Yeah, and that was where I was going to go next, is asking you, Khosro, what is the biggest misconception that we're seeing in the Western, not just media, but the world, about what's happening on the ground in Iran in contrast to everything else going on in the Middle East?
Where should I start? This crowd, specifically people on the left, they always talk about how much they hate racism, how much they are welcoming to the outsider. But Iranians were slaughtered on the streets of Iran, and when you talk with them, when you ask, why are you silent, they would respond, it's too far. I don't know enough. Educate yourself. I have been talking on air every day. Dozens and dozens of Iranian experts have been working round the clock, bringing the information to you in English. You are refusing to receive the information because you're comfortable in your ignorance. You're worried that the thin glass of your ignorance would be shattered by the truth about a nation that is proudly pro-American. Iran holds the largest pro-American population in the Middle East. 2, A nation that is extremely pro-Israel, every rally outside Iran of the Iranian diaspora that you look at over the past years, every one of them, people are carrying multiple banners. One of them is Iran's true national flag, the lion and the sun, and the other, depending on the country that is our host, it's the host country's flag, because we are grateful to all of these Western nations that have provided us with shelter, with safety, with freedom, with liberty to say what we think. And there is always an Israeli flag, because Israelis have stood by our side through this ordeal, you see? When I talk about these things, the frustration gets to a level that I lose my words.
But it's important because it's talking about the freedom of a people. It's talking about the freedom of not just a people, but an entire region that has been impacted with the funding from this nation, from Iran, and the tentacles that have really impacted across that whole region and beyond into the whole world. And I appreciate you highlighting just the fact that there is, at those rallies, and I've seen them myself, the Iranian true flag that is behind you, not in its colors, it's in blue, but obviously people know that logo, know the reality of what that speaks, alongside the Israel flag, alongside the flag of the nations they are being hosted in. Why are the nations, why do they take hold of the narrative that the media portrays that Iran is largely hostile to Israel, when we see on the ground that these demonstrations, both of those flags placed together? What is it that your research has shown you about how ordinary Iranians actually view Israel and the Israelis?
Right now, CNN has a team in Iran, a team of journalists. Their reporter, Frederick, was walking on the streets of Iran talking about the recent ongoing national uprising as if it was a blip in the Islamic Republic's history. They have sent journalists to Iran cycle after cycle for elections, for upheavals. Last time, one of their journalists was interviewing a senior IRGC officer as a random citizen. How ignorant that is. This is the type of journalism that is informing the Western population. That's the issue. The mainstream media in the West has constantly failed Iranians. They refuse to engage voices from Iran, who they invite on channels like CNN. Trita Parsi, someone who clearly has ties to the Islamic Republic, who is still lobbying for the Islamic Republic, who created this organization, NIAC, in the US, which is the unofficial lobby of the Islamic Republic in Washington. Officials within the regime, literally today, there is a video came out. They are saying, yeah, NIAC is our lobby in the US, but it's not doing a good job. And they are still listening to these people. The liberal leftist media is platforming people like these who feed the world lies about the population in Iran. Look at the Iranian history and culture. Before this country was occupied by this Islamist fascist state during the Pahlavi era, Iran was one of the only, if not the only, country that was safe for Jews in the Middle East. No pogroms happened. The state was not the sponsor of persecution of the Jews. Where else that happened? That's the roots. That's the culture of Iran. That's where Iranians are. They can repeat all the lies they want, but they cannot cover history, and the truth will not remain hidden forever.
So let's give some clarity to our listeners as well with regard to how the U.S. sanctions are perceived in Iran. Are the Iranian people blaming sanctions for their hardships, or are they blaming the regime that's running the country?
The thing is, when you have conversations with Iranians, actual Iranians, not lobbyists for the Islamic Republic or officials, they don't even bring up sanctions. They know that the sanctions there are not to harm the Iranian people. They know that the sanctions are targeted. Yes, organizations like Human Rights Watch have put out factually wrong reports blaming US sanctions for every malady in Iran. But yes, sanctions are kinda a blunter tool in the foreign policy toolbox, but they have been refined over the years against the Islamic Republic. And again, talk with Iranians. The Islamic Republic is selling oil at record levels to China. Where is the money going? Is it being spent on the Iranian people to making the situation better in the country? Or is it being spent on nuclear brinksmanship of the mullahs or making missiles that can be rained on neighbors in the region or exported, sent to terror groups like Hezbollah and Hamas? Every Iranian knows all the answers to these questions.
So in light of that, what kind of engagement do Iranians actually want from Washington or from Israel for that matter, or the nations of the world in a broader context?
But on the top of the list for every Iranian, if you ask them right now inside the country, is take out the political leadership of the Islamic Republic. During the 12-day war, the military branch was decimated. A large portion of the military commanders were taken out, and the armed forces of this regime, the actual threat, existential threat to our neighbors was weakened significantly. But during the war, immediately, former IRGC commanders like Ghalibaf, the parliament speaker, donned their IRGC uniform, stepped in and held the regime together. Now is time to go after these security/political leaders. Taking them out will provide Iranians with a chance to overthrow the Islamic Republic. Second is striking the regime's arms of oppression, from military forces and security forces directly involved with killing innocent Iranians and exporting terrorism abroad. That's point 2. 3, the regime is still actively engaging in so-called diplomacy, trying to hoodwink the world into signing another JCPOA. Halt those negotiations. Stop talking with terrorists. They are slaughtering people in Iran. They are injecting prisoners with poison as we talk. They claim that they have stopped executions, but at least 8 people are on the death row in Iran for participation in protesters. Among them is an 18-year-old. Stop talking with these terrorists and kick their diplomats out of Europe. That's enough. Enough talking for the sake of talking. Take immediate action.
So I wholeheartedly hear your heart and your passion coming through. What and how, or what do you think is the intent of these discussions that America wants to have with the current regime? I mean, what do you think? A, it's going to achieve anything, or do you think it's just a process whereby it's simply a delay tactic, or what is the expected outcome from your position? And we've seen these negotiations before. I lived in the Middle East for many years. I've seen that when Ahmadinejad had his A World Without Zionism conference, and he's quoted from Psalm 83 without knowing it. Come, let us wipe them out as a nation, that the name of Israel be no more in remembrance. It's been part of the policy of the regime for literally decades. I mean, this is going back to the early 2000s. But these negotiations are still there. There's still the way that the leadership of the world, quote unquote, wants to solve this situation. Firstly, is it going to work? Secondly, what do you think the outcome will be if it fails? And what's kind of the timeline for the day after?
Has negotiations with terrorists ever worked? Were we able to contain, Al-Qaeda or ISIS through negotiations? Worse than that, the world has even seen this in terms of negotiations with this type of fascist states. And Lord Chamberlain flies to Nazi Germany, signs a piece of paper, returns to London, holds it up in air as if that sheet of paper is going to protect Europe. It didn't. It didn't. How many lives were crushed because that delusion about diplomacy overruled preparing for war against fascism. The Islamic Republic is no different. We are dealing with Islamist fascists that are bent on occupying the world. Look at the constitution of the Islamic Republic. It clearly and directly states the whole point of the Islamic Republic existing is occupying the whole planet Earth and creating a unified state under Allah. You want that? Give them more time. They will achieve it because they have shown they are unrelenting. How many countries in the Middle East the Islamic Republic has consumed over the past 4 decades? A lot of these leftists in the West accuse Israel, the United States, every Western civilization of being colonizers and condemn them. Who is actually actively colonizing the Middle East right now, other than the Islamic Republic? I leave it at that. 2, the Islamic Republic and its pattern of negotiations. The pattern is always the same. They will increase the tension to the point that the world is scared and steps back. The thing is, this calculation doesn't work with Donald Trump. Every time that the Islamic Republic has pulled this dangerous game against past US presidents who lacked grit, who didn't have a backbone, they backed down and they gave the Islamic Republic exactly what it wanted. With Donald Trump, they have never been able to pull the trick. He has the US interests at heart. He uses unorthodox methods that we can discuss and disagree and criticize, but he delivers. When he sets his mind at delivering something for this nation, he does. When he wanted the Islamic Republic's active and increasing nuclear threat gone, he took decisive action. He has set his mind to dismantle this regime's threat to the world, and I believe he's going to achieve that as well. That's point 2. The regime is not going to make any concessions in these conversations. And you ask, what's the point of these talks? The US president is not the Mashiach. He's not going to deliver nations. He has a vow to this nation, to the American people, to preserve their interests. I don't expect him to go out of his way to save my nation. We are going to achieve our liberty ourselves, even if aid doesn't arrive from outside. But historically, this is a historic moment and a historic opportunity where Donald Trump can turn the tide of history with a flip of his hand. He can provide Iranians with enough resources and aid to overthrow this terrorist regime that has harmed US national interests for decades, that has killed hundreds and hundreds of Americans. He can end it. He can end it now.
Absolutely. So looking ahead then, what do you see, Khosro, as the most likely path for political and social change in Iran? How is that going to come about? Is it going to require military action, or is there another way that this can be resolved?
Surgical strikes from outside, weakening the regime enough for Iranians to overthrow the regime. That's the solution. People in my motherland have proved that they are the boots on the ground for regime change. We are fighting with empty hands. We are going to continue doing so until we end the Islamist occupation of our motherland. We are going to achieve that. But help can bring down the number of fatalities. That's the only difference. That's point 1. Point two, people inside my motherland have chanted the name of who they see as their leader. Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi has a very clear message and vision for the future of Iran. He has put forward plans for the day after the fall of the Islamic Republic. These are publicly available resources that have been released in multi-phases. People have criticized the plan again and again. We have incorporated that criticism. The plan is growing and expanding. Anyone who has come across Iranians over the past decades, you know that we are talented, we are highly educated, and we are capable. We come from a civilization that has been around for millennia. We are going to stay there. We have plans for our future. We have a leader who can take us to that future, and that future is not too far.
Thank you, Khosro, for your articulate exposition of what is going on in Iran from an Iranian's perspective outside, but also one who has lived there for many years. Where can our listeners find you and your organization online? How can they connect best with you?
We are on all social media channels, on Instagram and on X. Nufti has accounts. I also have accounts. There we have a website, Nufti, Google it, it comes up as the first result, hopefully. And also on YouTube, we have a podcast, Iran Watch. And I guess when I walk out of this studio, my colleagues have published our latest report on why the negotiations with the Islamic Republic are going to fall apart, which before walking in, we are getting signals that they actually are.
I can believe that, and I'm aware of that. I know they've tried to change the location already. Thank you so much for joining us today, Khosro Isfahani. We're praying that the people of Iran will find freedom from the oppression that they have faced for so long, that flag will be raised, and that the people of Iran will be fully and completely free to live their lives without the fear of being their lives being cut short through brutality of the regime that's currently in place. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Well, friends, we are going to turn our attention to an encouraging video that I came across this past week. It's one of Chaim Malshbin, who I consider a friend and has been a guest on Israel Matters, sharing stories of miracles that took place in his service in the IDF. These miracles, I hope it will encourage you that God is at work in the world today, even in the most difficult of circumstances.
Doing it actively right now. You're Special Forces in the North.
Dude,
Tell us a little bit about that and how God has been protecting you throughout this time.
Well, I'll
By
tell
the way,
you-
his shirt.
yeah.
Be aware of mine.
danger minds. You got air. This is what I see all the time because I deal with explosives, right?
That's a specialty, right?
Yeah, I deal with explosives, and so what you find is this is just for fun. This isn't my uniform, but what I see is that I was.
You're an explosive guy. I love your energy,
So,
man.
so what I do is I give helmet out to a soldier. He gets shot in the back of the head. It goes bing off his helmet that I gave with donations, by the way, from lovers of Israel around the world. Different kind of people love Israel. So I was like, that's like a miracle. But I'm like, wait, on the other hand, me processing stuff. On the other hand, that's what helmets are supposed to do, is to protect from bullets. So, okay, give a bulletproof vest. A guy not far from me, boom, shot in the chest by the Hamas. But then he's like, it's like a strong punch. Bam, I'm not gonna really punch you. And he's like, ugh. But I'm like, is that really a miracle? Isn't that what it's supposed to do, is protect you? I'm like, God, I want some big miracles. I'm like, our navigation didn't have the battery, didn't have the thing. Where do we go? Where do we go? Right, left. You could get killed. You go to the wrong way, you're instantly shot with RPGs. Boom, we're going right. And they're like, how does he know? I'm like, by faith, we're going right. We go right, boom, signaled, it's our guys. Right. Connection. These are like little miracles, Even the fact that me here, standing here after being in almost every tunnel, we're talking all the way from Beit Lahia down to Rafiah, Gaza City. I wrote a song called Gaza City, Change Your Ways.
North.
My point is I've been in all these different things, and I said, God, will you please give us a miracle that is undeniably you, to show the world that it's not just another country. This is a very special country. We literally came through the Red Sea, standing ovation for Aliyah.
What is Aliyah?
Aliyah, of course, is the great return of the Jewish people to the Promised Land. That there is a miracle. Right there, I'm a miracle that we were gathered back after 2,000 years. The temple's destroyed. Where's the Babylonian Empire? You have all these people that come against Israel throughout the whole history. Where are they?
Yeah.
Where are the Romans? Where are the, you had the Hittites, the Hivites, the Moabites, the mosquito bites. Just kidding. You have all these people. But what it is God's always protected us. So I said, show the world, God, that you're protecting us. One girl, up at night. One girl. She happened to be a believer. Okay? She's looking on her screen. System error, system error. Okay. Happened to be a believer. What's that on the screen? I don't know. So she's like, I better check what's going on in the middle of the night. Okay? Telescope. Whole sky full of missiles from Iran. If she didn't reset the system, because you try to lock onto targets, beep, 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 error. She literally, one girl who's a believer up at night was able to reset the system, wake everybody up. We are being obliterated in the sky. And then suddenly you have Jordan, call up everybody, and was able, because it takes them a while till they can get to us. Intercontinental ballistic missiles, drones, cruise missiles, so on and so forth. That for me is a miracle. That is undeniably God. That is what we were saved from, not one time, not two times, 3 times. Now, of course, we did have some damage. I walked through the rubble in Beersheba. I walked in Tel Aviv, Ramat Gan, walked through the rubble in Bat Yam. I saw the destruction, and Tel Aviv destruction.
But the casualties.
And the casualty was minimal. I saw one neighborhood all blown up, and I said to some of the guys, how many people died in this one? He's like, none. I'm like, are you kidding me? Well, some injuries, some people lost hearing, but none? God is watching over. So that for me was, I think, an answer to my prayer, weird answer to my prayer. God, show the world that you really are watching out for Israel. And then, of course, the United States jumps in. So I just see these things as giant miracles that literally, I'm a continuing miracle. I'm going back. I've been shot at by Hamas like this. As far away as that tree is, all around me. I heard the bullets going like this. It sounds like this. It sounds like.
Oh my gosh.
Ding, 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 hitting the metal. And I'm there with machine guns. Jam. My commander had a jam. He's like, that's what it felt like. And I'm like, you might want to do that faster. But literally, and God protected me. So I do believe that there's just God's hand on this people and on this land. He'll never leave us nor forsake us as a people. And my goal really is that the world will come and align with Israel in friendship.
And that's Chaim's heart through and through. He wants to see the nations aligning with Israel and seeing these miracles in their own lands, as well as the miracles that have happened in his life in the IDF and also in the survival. I mean, it truly, thinking back, was an absolute astonishing miracle how few casualties there were in the 12-day war that was alluded to by more than alluded to by Khosro earlier. Well, today, as our Hebrew word study, I want to take a few moments to reflect on the Hebrew word for servant, eved, and what it means to serve the Lord in the very real, often unseen places of our lives. And these places in our lives are often the quiet places that people don't necessarily see. Well, recently, another Christian foster family shared with us the long, exhausting, and deeply complicated work of guiding their teenage foster son towards adulthood. Their days included run-ins with law enforcement, job instability, educational hurdles, moments requiring tough love, and countless hours spent teaching, budgeting, and basic life skills. And as they spoke, we nodded and gently reminded them this is the Lord's work. The faithful way they serve this young man is ultimately service offered to his Creator. You see, service is rarely glamorous. It doesn't usually feel particularly holy, quote unquote. In our wider culture, being a servant is not something that people aspire to. But in Scripture, in the Lord's upside-down kingdom, being a servant of God is not shameful. It is an honor. And the Hebrew word eved carries layered meaning depending on context. It's often translated as servant, slave, or bondservant. But at its core, an eved is one who works, serves, and labors, and even worships, motivated by obligation, responsibility, and sometimes deep gratitude and love. The word comes from the Hebrew root avad, which means to work, to serve, and to worship. And that connection matters, because in the Hebrew worldview, work, service, and worship are not separate compartments. They're not mutually exclusive. Worship is far more than singing songs. Whatever God has called us to do, when it is done unto Him, it becomes an act of worship. We hear this clearly in God's words to Pharaoh, "Let my people go, so that they may worship Avad me. Exodus 8 verse 1. Israel was freed not just to sing, but to serve. You aren't free just to sing, but you're called to serve. And Eved lives to do the will of the Lord. And throughout Scripture, God lovingly names his faithful ones by this title. Abraham is called his servant. Jacob, Moses, Job, and to David the Lord says, I took you from the pasture, from tending the flock, and appointed you ruler over my people Israel. And he calls him my Eved. That's 1 Chronicles 17 verse 7. God delights in identifying himself with those who serve him. Even more astonishing, friends, the coming Messiah is described as the Lord's Eved. The book of Isaiah paints a powerful portrait of the servant who would suffer in order to redeem. By his knowledge, my righteous servant, Eved, it is there, will justify many, and he will bear their iniquities. That's Isaiah 53 verse 11. You see, the servant would save not through force, but through suffering. And Jesus, Yeshua, is the ultimate plot twist in the story of redemption. Many in first century Israel failed to recognize him because he was not the triumphant military king they expected. Instead, this king would suffer. This king would serve. Jesus is the sacrificial servant king everyone needed and no one anticipated. The Christian life is about emulating Jesus. And what did Jesus do when he encountered brokenness, messiness, sickness, grief, sin, and pain? He moved towards it. He engaged, he helped, he served. And ultimately, we believe that Jesus himself became broken on our behalf so that our brokenness could be healed. Isaiah 53 tells us plainly that this was always the plan. Jesus said, whoever serves me must follow me. And where I am, my servant also will be. My Father will honor the one who serves me. John 12:26. Though he was worthy of all honor and worship, Jesus humbled himself in complete submission to the Father, even to the point of death. Scripture also gives us a striking picture of a servant who chooses lifelong devotion to his master. In Exodus 21, an Eved who loves his master may choose permanent service. His ear is pierced at the doorpost, marking a willing, loving commitment for life. That's Exodus 21, verse 2-6. It says, if you buy a Hebrew servant, he is to serve you for 6 years, but in the 7th year he shall go free, without paying anything. If he comes alone, he is to go free alone. But if he has a wife, when he comes, she is to go with him. If his master gives him a wife, and she bears him some sons or daughters, the woman and her children shall belong to her master, and only the man shall go free. But if the servant declares, I love my master and my wife and children, and do not want to go free, then his master must take him before the judges. He shall take him to the door or the doorpost, and pierce his ear with an awl, and then he will be his servant for life. This image beautifully mirrors our devotion to the Lord, not forced obedience, but surrendered love. So the question then before us is this: have we fully submitted ourselves to serving our loving and wise master? Are we available to him, offering our lives as worship, even when it is not fun or glamorous? God is not looking for impressive resumes. He's looking for surrendered hearts. And we see this posture perfectly embodied in Mary, the mother of Jesus, when she says, I am the Lord's servant. May it happen to me according to your word. That's Luke 1, verse 38. That is the voice of an Eved, the voice of a servant. May it be our reality as well. I'd love to hear your thoughts, friends, in the comments on today's show. Take a moment to like, subscribe, and share. It helps us to get the message of Israel Matters out further and wider. Let's stand together and use our voice and influence to combat anti-Semitism wherever it raises its ugly head, and to point people to the Lord and his word. Let's be praying for all that is unfolding in Iran. Israel Matters is a listener-supported show, so please consider supporting us through the links in the description below to help it make it possible to produce more free content like this episode. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Stephen Briggs, and this is Israel Matters.